Yo,
Hello, hello. How are you doing?
I'm way too busy with other things.
Yeah, yeah. Same. Let me share my screen real quick. Last time. All right. So can you actually see the full screen, not the partial?
I I just see Google in the
Okay,
search bar.
yeah. All right, that should work. Okay, cool. So let me copy all this. Yeah, we didn't have the SIG this morning because I got paged in the wee early bits of the morning, so could not
And
make it.
you're on the pager duty rotation.
No, I'm actually the escalation, and
Okay.
the engineer slept through it, so I ended up picking it up. So yeah, usually how it goes.
Yeah.
Uh, let's see here. Close these two. Da, da, da. Agenda. Links. Okay, cool. Um, so I still am working on getting the internal PR approved for 0.5. I thought I would have it done last week, but apparently I did the whole process wrong. So I am fixing that today, and I should be able to have the PR up and running. The internal process is what was different or what I did wrong. But yeah, once I get that done, I should be able to then create the PR for 0.5, and then we should be able to do the release this week. So that's the goal. And then so that was pretty much it. And then another thing is we've been mostly thinking about definitions. I don't know if you saw the one PR, which was in github.com, CDEvents, not dev. And then we got this one PR, which has these definitions. So I mentioned, I think I brought this up last time, um, but this is like the three concepts: build, test, and store. So we want to get these finalized. So if no one has any feedback for me um this week, I think we'll probably merge this in, is kind of the thinking. And then we're going to start working on a more granular level. So the idea going forward is in the spec here, we would go to the schemas, or actually it might be easier to go here. Start with this continuous integration. And
You
we'd go to like build. We already defined build. We just, link it to that build page, say this is how build is defined. And then we'd also define artifact, because artifact is it's kind of defined in there, but we want to be very specific on what we mean by artifact, which gives a description here produced by a build. So we just want to be very specific. We want to also, if you notice, these definitions, they have examples, et cetera, et cetera. So when we look at this page, when we click build, it needs to have all of that in there. It needs to have like these are the tools. These are like a tool that might have a build event. That's like in Jenkins. That's what this looks like. These are events that are not build events. To kind of where there might be like some gray area where people typically think might be a build in terms of CD events, but might not be. And I'll give you an example here. So. We say for tests, for example, right? Like manual exploratory testing. So that's just like, running a local unit test, right? You don't want to send a CD event for that. So we want to say that this is not the test examples that we care about for CD events. So when you're using CD events, when we say test, it's from some service or something, right? As opposed to like, someone running it locally in their dev environment. So we want to be very explicit in what constitutes um, uh, a test event versus not. And, we call out the specific edge cases. So we're going to probably follow that format and make this a little bit more verbose. So we're going to probably keep this like this, but then add a bunch of information here to really make it specific and opinionated. So I think that's kind of be the goal here, and then maybe add some examples too, like how like this event, like because I understand like this page is like pretty light, which is fine, like people don't want to like if they don't want to get lost in the words, but the problem is you know people, for me at least, like I want to see like a example payload in this page. I want to see like use cases for these type of particular events. That way it's very, very obvious on the whole like how this whole event is supposed to act and be used. So yeah, I think those are kind of the changes I'm thinking about going probably starting next week. So I will need your help as well as help from the other SIG, the morning SIG, to start defining these. We'll start with probably CI because that's the one of the easier ones to do because we already have build done. We just need to define artifact, and then we are going to go more specific. When we say a build queued, what does queued mean? I mean, it's obvious what queued mean, but we just want to be very, very clear on what all these terms mean. And then another one is like started, because started is a little bit ambiguous because some people might be like, what constitutes a start, right? Because some people might think it's like, oh, the start is like when you start compiling. Another one might be like, oh, when you start fetching dependencies, it could be like, well, that's part of compiling as well. Well, depending on what ecosystem you're in. But that's my point, right? There's multiple ways to define start. We need to have a systematic way or a strong enough definition where it caters or it's very specific on what start means and how it's supposed to be used, as well as finished. Does that make sense, Luke?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, cool, cool, cool. So that's gonna be the next few weeks. I imagine we're just gonna kind of start cranking these out. And kind of outlining what all the words mean, because like I said, they're a little bit kind of up in the air. And then another one we're gonna actually, what we probably should do is like we'll start with build, and then we have these three fields here: ID, source, and artifact ID. We say like uniquely identifies the subject within the source, which is fine, but it still can mean anything. Like, because so like they give this example here, just like 1 2 3 4, right? So it's like we want to be very specific on what this means, right? Like this needs to be alias to some sort of resource. Like this is like a pipeline execution or a build execution or something of that nature, right? We don't want to just have like this generic ID here for build, because like it's I don't think it's not specific enough. And it's like, same thing with source, right? It's like source, URI reference. And then if you go to source here, which is broken, so I need to create a radar or a GitHub issue for that. I forgot where that was. Maybe it's in core. Source, the source. Where is this going? This is going to spec MD and then source. Okay, so all right, so source. So we go here, it says defines the context in which an event happens. The main purpose of the source is to provide global uniqueness for source plus ID. The source may have a single producer or a group of producers that belong to the same application. Where selecting the format for the source, it may be useful to think of how clients may use it, et cetera, et cetera. But that is so generic that you could use anything, right? For instance, right, they could use /tecton. Someone else that has another tecton instance could be the website like or it could be like instead of /tecton, it's just tecton, right? Or it's HP or app colon / tecton, right? There's so many ways to define that I really don't like this definition. And I think it's very confusing. And it took me a long time to really understand what this is asking for, the source and the context. Because when you go into the subject also has a source, which says defines the context in which the subject originated, right? Which that doesn't help, right? And then it links to the same exact page, right? Like right here, giving the source subject, right? Which it says the exact same thing here, which it doesn't give it like gives an example, but again, it's like it's not really um it's too open. It's too open of a definition. And so and if we look here, it says, where the subject originated. And in most cases, the source can be the subject matches the source of the event, et cetera, et cetera. But when you think about it, subject originated, right? That could mean like a region. That could mean a cluster. That could mean a service, a specific tool, a pipeline, right? It's like there's so many things that fit that definition that it's horribly defined. So we need to do a better job. So we're going to fix source and make that a lot more opinionated and more specific on how to use it. Does that make sense? And is that as confusing or as it is that definition as open as I think it is, or am I being a little too harsh there?
I mean, I would complain with whoever came up with this. Um, but no, I mean, when you were first talking about sort of some like your earlier examples, like Tecton versus Jenkins.io and stuff, it made me think
Mhm.
of like Java and namespacing
Yep,
um,
yep.
kind of things. And it's like, how do we, is that something like CDEvents needs to come up with a enumeration of
Format or something.
sources
Yeah.
or something, and everyone, Tecton and Jenkins and Argo and everyone go submit a namespace request or something. And
Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, we have this name spacing idea too, which is going to come later.
yeah,
But yeah, you're kind of walking on what we're talking about here. But yeah, like I said, there's a bunch of issues with the definitions. And so we need to do a better job illustrating like what these things mean. And so the other one is that version is going to be renamed spec version, which that should hopefully be more obvious than what that is. And then this version always is just type or the type version, which is also fine. Um but yeah, so that's going to be the goal though, is start defining these individual fields as well as the subject and predicate themselves, so everything has a very specific meaning to the word. So when someone uses source, they know exactly what you're talking about. And another thing that I think we need to do as well, any any field in here should not intersect with any field in here, because the issue that I have is when I say source, right? It's like, which source are we talking about? Are we talking about the context source or the source and pipeline run, right? And it's very, very confusing. And then we have this ID. It's like, do we talk about the context ID or do you want to talk the subject ID, right? And
yeah,
so I think we need to make those differentiations somehow. So I think that's another thing, because like I said, like I'm a very big proponent of readability. And so, like when I'm going through code reviews, if I read something and I'm just like, this is hard to read, like I will comment on that and see if we can improve it. And when I'm reading the spec, I'm like, man, everything about the spec is just so hard to read. And so I think we need to do a little bit of a better job kind of outlining like what these things are. And specifically because this source means a completely different thing than this source, which is really annoying. And this ID means a completely different thing than this ID. This ID is just a UUID. This ID actually is a reference to the actual subject. So it's like they have two different meanings. And so if you're talking about just ID, it can get very confusing if people don't know which scope you're in. So I don't know. We need a better way of like illustrating that. Um, so yeah, these are the problems that we need to solve in the next like few weeks. And this is gonna be probably uh a point release, I imagine, of the 0.5. So it'll be 0.5.1, which will have all the updated definitions and all the updated examples. And I don't think we'll get them all in one go, but we can always do it incrementally. Like I said, like with this starting with this PR. So that's gonna be the goal here moving forward in the future. So yeah, so that's pretty much the gist of it. I just wanted to give an update of for 0.5. Was there anything in particular that you needed or had any questions about?
The pull request that you wanted people to look at, can you link that somewhere?
Yeah, yeah. Here we go. Um, agenda. I'll just put it here. It's so ugly. Um, what is it? What do I call this? Definitions? Yeah, let's call it definitions. And then, do I have this backwards? I do have it backwards. Uh, do that. Oh my God, what is happening? For some reason, HackMD has been like a lot slower recently. I think it's because we're at this like character limit, but yeah. So here's the PR definitions PR. So if you please look at that and try to like come at it like you're like coming up with a dictionary and you're like this definition and you it's going to be the most strict definition or strict dictionary because like the English dictionaries we have like synonyms and antonyms and so we don't want that. We want no synonyms. We want one thing to mean exactly the one thing. And so be very very blunt and very very a very big critique on it. I won't. My feelings won't won't be hurt. So just letting you know there. And like I said, if you have any questions in particular, please just reach out to me in Slack or just on the PR itself, and we can work it out and figure out if anything needs to be updated. So yeah. So was there anything else? Was or just the PR?
Yeah, that's it. I don't really have anything else at the moment related to everything else going on. Um,
Okay,
yeah,
sounds
I'll
good. Why does
probably
this look weird? This looks weird, right? Like I see this agenda, September 30th. But why do we have this new attendees? Do you see this?
um
That's not here, right? Am I
yeah,
going crazy? Like what? Why is that there? I'm really confused. Okay, either way, we'll figure it out.
yeah,
But yeah, okay, if that's it, then we can make this a pretty short day.
yeah, that's good for me.
And like I said, like next week or yeah, next week we're gonna really start hitting the definitions. And so we'll probably start with the CI definition. So I'll put that on the agenda for next week. And yeah, I'll look forward to finally getting these definitions cranked out to be at least both consistent and obvious on what they are. So, all right, did Luke? Oh, and Luke, you went to where were you went somewhere last week? Was that a conference?
Like 2 weeks ago, I was at DevOps Days, Rockies.
Oh yeah, how was that?
It was okay. Like it's really good people, a great event. The kind of work I do is, border, how much like the stuff we do here in CDEvents, how much of it is DevOps versus architecture and platform engineering and things like that, versus like sysadmin type things.
Gotcha, gotcha. Did
Yeah.
anything look like seed events could fit into like that looked like new event types or something that you saw that might be interesting, or were you just there like just kind of like checking it
Um,
out?
yeah, I mean, I did a talk about platform engineering, being customer focused, things like that.
Hmm.
But yeah, I think for sure there was a a good conversation that we had, a lot of the unconference sessions and open table sessions where there was a discussion of, what is DevOps today, with platform engineering in mind as an example. So like I think there's a good community of discussion about like, yeah, what is this space? And I think I've talked about this before where it's like, oh, I want to kill the idea of CI/CD and call it application delivery. I think the CNCF tags are playing with those names as well. I think DevOps is ripe for that reframing of what is the domain and, talking about application delivery as a whole and the complexity of everything like you were trying to figure out in these definitions and such of like, yeah, you have CI events, you have CD events, you have artifacts, you have all sorts of builds and moving things around. You have these GitOps principles now, you have security scanners, and there's a whole variety of events, complexity to the space. And how do we, rather than again trying to buy the one perfect product that integrates all this stuff, it's like, oh, let's not try to do that, but instead interoperate with CD events as an example. So I think that message is ripe and ready for the DevOps space. And so yeah, it certainly would be interesting to yeah, kind of have encourage more people to share, discuss, perhaps in the series of DevOps days out there.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, because the reason why that's kind of interesting is Didisi, he gave a talk about DevOps and CD events just like a couple weeks ago. So it kind of lines up kind of interesting. Like in that same timeline, but he didn't go to that conference, but he might have prepared it like, because that conference was happening. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, so that's really, really interesting. And I'm curious to see what kind of becomes of that. But yeah, like I said, like I said, like, please always keep a lookout if we're missing any sort of events, or if someone asks about it, like there's a particular use case that you think is interesting that could fit in CD events, please let me know. And we
Yeah.
can always make that happen. So, all right, but yeah, thanks, Luke, and I'm glad you had a lot of fun there. It sounds like it was a blast. And we'll we'll see. Oh, and I wanted to mention that we'll see if I'm able to go to KubeCon, which I
See
think
see you in
it,
Atlanta soon, right?
yeah, yeah. So I'm gonna submit because I can submit it, but whether or not it will be approved is another story. So I'm gonna submit it today and see what happens. But yeah, I'll let you know though. Okay,
Yeah, since this is, publicly recorded, I hope the DC make sure you get approved and
for sure, for sure. All right, awesome. Well, I'll talk to you later then. All right, Luke.
yep. Great
All
chatting
right,
with
have a
you.
good one. All right, bye.